it's Brennan. Welcome to my channel and welcome to another video. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you my 3 favorite adult fantasy series. First of all, let's address the addition to my background. Nick, my husband, got a new desk and this bookshelf was over there, so don't think my book collection just doubled overnight. We just did some rearranging and now this is even more extra than it was before. Second thing I want to address are these beautiful earrings I'm wearing. It's like the phases of the moon and they're black with like gold glitter detail on them. I got them from an Instagram account. I'll link it down below. She has so many beautiful handmade pieces of clay jewelry. Highly recommend. These are like really lightweight and great quality and super cute. All right, now without further ado, let's get into my 3 favorite adult fantasy series. 2 of these series are going to be by Brandon Sanderson, who is just the king of fantasy writing, the king of putting out huge, thick fantasy books quicker than anyone I've ever seen. And the first series I want to mention is his Mistborn series. This is actually the only complete series I'm going to be mentioning, but I have the first 3 in the Mistborn trilogy. I have Mistborn, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. And this series is set in a world where we have 2 sides of society. We have the noble class and we have the Ska. And the Ska are like slaves. And they have, through the centuries, even become genetically inferior almost to the nobility. They're used as slaves, they're treated horribly, and for the last 1,000 years, this society has had the same ruler. He's known as the Lord Ruler, and this society almost looks on him as a god, which he's been around for 1,000 years. So a very mysterious background for him. And this series follows our main character, Vin. And at the beginning of this series, Vin is a 16-year-old street urchin. She's part of the Ska class, but she and her brother have been hanging around with different crime rings. These rings of criminals like to have Vin around because for some reason when she is around they have very good luck. Their heists always go according to plan when she's around, so she is kind of kept around as their good luck charm. This doesn't mean that they treat her well. She's still treated poorly even amongst people who are like her. And in this world, people can have different abilities. The magic system in this world focuses on metals. Not everyone has abilities to control these metals, but some people can manipulate metals. And you do that by physically like ingesting metals. They'll have like solutions of alcohol with pieces of metal in them, and they can like drink it and burn the metals for their abilities. So some people can push and pull metals. They can use them like as weapons, or they'll like throw coins on the ground and be able to travel far distances. Some people can burn metals to manipulate emotions. They can dampen emotions, or they can enrage emotions. And some people can also burn metals to heighten their senses or make themselves stronger. And some people in this world can control all the metals, and they are known as Mistborn. And one day our main character Vin has a run-in with another one of our main characters, Kelsie. And Kelsie has just gotten out of being a slave, and he is now the leader of this crime ring that wants to change society. And Kelsie wants to do that by almost killing all of the nobility. He blames all of the world's problems on the nobility and the way that society is now. He is rounding up all of the Ska and he wants them to revolt against the nobility. And Kelsie is a Mistborn. He's actually recently a Mistborn. He had to have like a very extreme physical and mental breakdown almost to come into his powers. So Kelsie and his crew stumble upon Vin, and they know that something is interesting about her. So Vin's crime ring that she's in kind of implodes, and the nobility get a little curious about Vin. So Kelsie and his crew scoop her up, and she comes along on their quest to change society. We find out more about Vin and Kelsie's past. We find out more about the powers in this world. We find out more about the Lord Ruler and how he has ruled this world for the last 1,000 years. I will say, each of the books in this series, you get to the end and you're like, well, okay, like we're at the end. How is there another book after this? And Brandon Sanderson, just the plot twists. I was shocked in every single one of these books. The development, the world building, the magic system, the emotions. This series is so good. It's completed, and there's actually like an extension series that I have not read yet. It's the Alloy of Law series. It is the same world, except several centuries after the happenings in this series. We will jump right into the second Brandon Sanderson series I'm going to mention. This is his Stormlight Archives series. There are currently 3 books out in this series so far. The first, The Way of Kings. Second, Words of Radiance. And third is this huge chunky book, Oathbringer. The 4th book in this series is coming out in the next month, less than a month now, and that would be Rhythm of War. Let me give you an overview of the Stormlight Archives. This series is set in a world that is in a cycle of never-ending wars, and these wars are so devastating that they completely wipe out society. They wipe out all of the technological advances people have been made, so we don't know very much about them, because there has not been anything recorded that has survived those wars. There are signs in the world when the Voidbringers are going to come. We start out the series in the past, and supposedly the Heralds, which are this group of like warriors who show up every time one of these wars is going to happen. And we start out the series thinking that something has happened that has stopped these wars, but society at the beginning of the Stormlight Archives also has 2 classes of people. You have your light eyes, who have physically lighter colored eyes, and they are like the nobility. They're the only people who can rule and have power. And then you also have the dark eyes, which aren't really slaves, but they are just like your peasant class in this society. And we follow characters from each of the classes in society, and there's also different races of people in this world, and we read from so many different perspectives, from so many different cultures within this world. It is just a huge world, and we get a taste of all of it. So in this first book, we follow an assassin who has to kill a king. We follow a king's brother. We follow a soldier turned slave. And we follow a scholar who might also have to be a thief. There is not really supposed to be magic in this world because the magic system is associated with the times when there were wars. But some of our characters start to experience some of these abilities. And the magic system in this world is based on Stormlight. It's called the Stormlight Archives. And Stormlight is held within these gemstones. And this world also has a system of huge, devastating storms. There are certain people who can predict when these storms are going to happen, but when these storms come by, they can invest energy into these stones. And typically the stones are just used as currency, but there are some people who can manipulate that power for magic. And some of the different magical abilities, one of them is called wind running. You can like increase your agility and you can just like travel really far distances just in the air. Another one of these abilities is called light weaving, and you can create illusions and disguises. One of our characters, Dalinar, who is the king's brother in this series, he has been having some dreams. And through those dreams, we get to see kind of the past of this world and see why things may not be as society seems. But the current conflict that is going on in this society is between humans and they're called the Parshendi. And they are a race of beings who are kind of, I don't want to say beetle-like, but they have like shells on their bodies and they have their own language and they're almost seen as an alien type of race in this world. So we follow the humans and the Parshendi during their current conflict, but then they have to realize that they have bigger problems. I hope that's a comprehensive review. This series has just so much that goes on. It's hard for me to combine it all into a plot summary, but I will say this, out of these 3 series, this is probably my favorite. I just love the characters. I love the vast amount of world that we get to explore. There's a character in here called Wit, and he is just so interesting. He's one of those characters who kind of knows a lot about everything that's happening, and we don't really know why he knows these things. He's one of those characters who just shows up at opportune times. He's funny. He's mysterious, and anytime he's mentioned in a chapter, I get so excited because we're going to learn quite a bit about what's going on. I hope that makes you want to read this series. I cannot stress enough the fact that this is not an incredible review of this series because there's just so much that goes on. So I would recommend picking up the first book and diving in to the Stormlight world. And the last series I want to mention is another unfinished fantasy series, and this is the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. The first book, The Name of the Wind, and the second book, The Wise Man's Fear. I will preface this by saying we have been waiting a long time for another release in this series, but it is just so good that I have to recommend it. This series is set in a more traditional fantasy world. Think of like journeys and quests and adventures. There's still a lot of culture and technological advances in this world, but it is just more of your traditional old world fantasy when you think about that. But we follow our main character, Kvothe. That's Kvothe. And we start the series with him as a grown man. He's living incognito as an innkeeper. And one day he has a guest come into his inn who is interested in his story. And Kvothe is very reluctant to tell his story because he is trying to put that life behind him. He is just trying to live a simple life now, running his inn. And so this setup is so interesting because it's told from Kvothe's first person point of view, and it is him telling his story to this chronicler. And once that chronicler talks Kvothe into telling him his story, we learn about his tragic childhood and we learn about the magic that he is going to harness. The magic in this world is more accessible to people. Anyone can do it. It is just very technical and it requires a lot of learning and skill. So we hear as Kvothe gets through his childhood with the goal of becoming a student at this wonderful academy to learn about this magic system. It's called sympathy, and it's kind of used by drawing a link between two objects, and then you can make those objects do what you want them to do. It's very interesting, and Kvothe is very good at it. He is like a prodigy for this, but he is coming from poverty, and this school is very expensive to attend. We get to see how he makes ends meet and how he flourishes at this school. He makes friends and he makes enemies, and he meets some very interesting mentors. The name of this book is The Name of the Wind, and there is a certain ability called naming, and you can call to the wind and make it do your bidding. But this power can be very hard to control, and it's very hard to grasp because once you call the wind, you forget its name. It like does not have a set name. You can call to different elements also, like I believe you can call to stone and fire and things like that. Honestly, it's been a while since I read this, but the story is just so good. The plot kind of hinges on this creepy folklore beings, and they're called the Condrian, shoot, and the havoc they want to wreak on society. This book goes back and forth between Kvothe's past and the present, and there are some things happening in the present that make you think Kvothe is going to have to get his act together and get back on his magic doing, because when we see Kvothe in the present, he cannot use his abilities anymore. In the second book of this series, Kvothe has to go on some journeys, and we learn more about the world, and he learns even more abilities, and he just comes across as such the hero, such the amazing character. And then we come back to the present where for some reason he can't use his abilities anymore, and we don't know why. We still don't know why. I don't even know why this series is called the Kingkiller Chronicles, because so much happened in these first two books, but there's just still so much more. I really truly hope another book comes out eventually, because I just have to know where Kvothe's story goes. There's also some romance in here. There is music in here. Kvothe is a very talented lute player, and I just can't recommend it enough, but I also hesitate a little bit just because it has been, like I wanted to say, almost 10 years since the last book came out. Alrighty everyone, that has been my 3 favorite adult fantasy series. I mentioned in my last video the books I want to read before 2021 that I love fantasy, but I'm not the most well-read fantasy reader. So leave a comment down below your favorite adult fantasy series, also young adult, I'm not picky. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one.